Welcome, everybody, to Into the Fire, coming to you live from KGRA. This is Jason White, your host. I'm incredibly excited about tonight. It's like going back. It looks like I'm underwater, actually, with that background lighting. I don't know. Comment in there if you like the lights or not. I actually like them. I like that 70s look and all those lights. But Jason White here. It is February the 7th, 2025. And I'm excited to be here. Hopefully we're going to have no more issues with the mic. I wanted to mention that we had a sold out show in Fort Smith, Arkansas at the U.S. Marshals Museum. And you'll see that there was quite the crowd that actually showed up to watch me speak. And I have to say, it went absolutely without a hitch. It was absolutely fantastic. We had over 300 and some odd people that had arrived for this, and we didn't have any technical difficulties, which is probably one of the biggest things that I stress out about when I'm speaking. And it went great. I can't say enough about it. And I got to meet, that's just one picture of one of the many, many people that I actually got to meet and sign a card for. And it was just fantastic. I couldn't have asked for a better group of people that had showed up for this. And it was an epic evening. I can't say enough. And they were great hosts at the U.S. Marshals Museum. If you're in that area and you haven't been to the Marshals Museum, you should give it a shot and give it a look. They're having a true crime series, basically, where each month they're trying to have a different guest that shows up and speaks about various things. And I think this month they're going to have a podcaster that's going to speak. It should be pretty amazing. And from that, with that said, probably my next future date I think that I'm speaking at is going to be, I'll be in San Antonio. That's not open to the public. And then I will be in Lincoln, Nebraska, of all places. And I'm really, really excited about that. Lincoln, Nebraska, I'm going to be speaking at the Nebraska Heart Institute. I was invited to go there by a heart surgeon that is the CEO of the hospital. And to his surprise, I actually worked in heart surgery. He'd actually invited me to come watch an open heart surgery. And I was like, well, this guy must not know who the heck I am. I've been on like 500 of those, but I wrote him back and I was like, hey, I'd still be interested in watching one. And technically speaking, I could probably actually assist on one if need be. But he invited me to come up and speak. I'll be doing that sometime in April. We haven't set the date. That is not open to the public. I'm sorry. It's going to be closed off to the hospital personnel. But nevertheless, it's going to be, I don't know. I'm starting to think that maybe I ought to open up a couple of 2 or 3 dates, or maybe 4 or 5 dates. If I had enough interest throughout the country, I thought about opening up a few different dates that maybe I could set up a private deal and we could get together and I could do it for the public. You never know. It was such a big event. I enjoyed it so much that we might do it again. All right. So I don't want to waste any more time here. I want to get right to it. I want to welcome Leslie Ghiglieri to the show. Leslie is actually a friend of mine. We have known each other for, I think, going on about 3 years now. I could be off a little bit, but it's been a while. And she's going to tell us about herself here in a moment. But she and I actually, we did a lot of podcasts together, or at least, we did the same podcast together, 3PNR. And on that podcast, you can actually catch episodes of that on YouTube. And if you go to YouTube, to the 3PNR site, you can catch many episodes with Leslie and I, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that here in a minute. But Leslie, tell us about yourself. Great to have you here, my old friend and author. Welcome. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. I appreciate the invitation. And I started my experience, I guess you'd say, with law enforcement as a 911 operator in Santa Cruz. And once I got involved in the field, I was very interested and I could see that was something I would like to continue to do. And I worked there for about 3 years, and after that moved to Southern Oregon, where I live now, and worked for the sheriff's office as a deputy sheriff there, and working in dispatch records and warrants, and occasionally, because of where we live in Southern Oregon, helped out on eradicating some marijuana gardens. We were the, I think, capital of the world at that time. That's all changed up a little bit, but I worked there. And because of my job working there, I got involved in a computer networking system that was set up in this area to connect different law enforcement agencies to one another so they could share information. So this was different than a statewide criminal history or a nationwide history. It was local primarily, although there were some other counties that were involved. So it was 2 counties. I took care of 17 agencies, and I took care of their hardware, making sure it was working, and their software as far as helping them establish new programs and working with the programmer to set up like crime analysis and different programs that were helpful to the agencies. So I worked for them for another 4 years, and then in the Southern Oregon region, unfortunately, maybe Jason, you could appreciate this, but it's kind of difficult to get the agencies to cooperate with each other. And everyone sort of has their own idea of what they wanted out of a computer system. So when that became a problem, the agencies in Southern Oregon decided to disband. And even though the sharing of information was very helpful for them, just their independent desires just didn't match up enough. So when that disbanded, then I was out of a job and I went back to school and got my degree. And then after that, I had 2 of my youngest children, and I ended up staying and homeschooling them for 8 years in their elementary years. So that's what occupied my time. After that, I became an advocate for children under the judicial system. They're called CASAs here. And you work with kids that have gotten in the system through no fault of their own, and you're a voice for them in the court. So I did that for 5 years.
Great. You know, we're going to talk about 3 different segments here in this episode tonight because Leslie brings different things. We'll talk about the podcast. I wanted that previous podcast that we did because we did some exceptional work as far as I'm concerned. It was actually a true crime panel that it was myself, Leslie, and Sandra. Do you know Sandra's last name? I can't remember.
Martinez.
Okay, Sandra Martinez, and the host was Adam. What was
Rodriguez?
Okay, Rodriguez. All right, they're not related, but
no.
Yeah. So we were on that thing, and we talked a lot about famous cases, and of those, what were some of those, Leslie, that you can remember?
Well, there was the Scott Peterson case, and then the Michael Peterson case, and the O.J. Simpson case, which I heard has just come out with some new Netflix series, I think a series of 4 episodes. I'm not sure what direction they take that hasn't been taken before, but apparently with some new evidence. And then we did the Memphis 4.
West Memphis 3.
Okay.
Yeah,
Something like that.
That was fascinating.
It was very interesting.
And we did a couple of others as well. The Michael Peterson is basically going to be the staircase. Mm-hmm. And what was interesting about it is that we had 3 different, Sandra actually worked in the prison. She's a forensic psychologist or psychiatrist. I think psychologist, actually. So she was a forensic psychologist. She worked in the prison. You had Leslie's take on it, which she is a true crime author. And then you had my take, which, I kind of dissected crime scene stuff. And, really those episodes are about cases that, the police work has been just absolutely scrutinized to a whole nother level, and with good reason. I mean, really, that's what kind of made that. So if you get a chance, you should check that out. And we may, was there any of those cases that you just kind of walked in there with a preconceived notion, and then after we had that sit down, that you kind of maybe changed your mind? Because we talked about JonBenet Ramsey too, and that's actually in the news as of recently as well.
Yeah, what's interesting to me is that these are they stand the test of time almost, because you can still talk about them and people are interested in what's going on, because most of them are really unsolved, or if there was a conviction, there was still a lot of question about whether the conviction was a solid one. So I was thinking back to our time, and I feel like the Michael Peterson case was very interesting to me. And I had never heard of that case before. And the fact that he had two women in his life that died falling down a staircase, I thought was rather strangely coincidental. And I think because there were two different programs on Netflix and HBO, one coming more from his side and the other more that he was responsible. I think that helped make us be able to look at the case a little more on both sides of the, like who was really responsible. Was he, or was it someone else like he claimed?
Right. We don't make any money on those things. So if you get a chance and you really want to be entertained for a good hour or an hour and a half, those are some exceptionally good podcasts. I think I'm proud of I'm proud of what we talked about. Of course, I'm the only one that ever got vilified by the comments, but that comes with the territory. You're always going to have a cop hater out there. It's just the way it rolls, but not in this room and not on this podcast, because my people are loyal OGs and they're super followers. And by the way, I appreciate everybody being here, from Steph to Terry and all the regular people that show up in here. And there's going to be, I didn't tell you this, Leslie, and I don't know if the 3PNR was like this, but we're going to be watched from throughout the world, from Australia through Europe. There's people that checks us out from all over the place. And so that's good. We don't make any money to do this, but we want you to be entertained and happy. And then the next thing that I want to talk about briefly that I think is absolutely fascinating is and if you don't know who Ed Kemper is, Ed Kemper actually is a serial killer I think he's credited with 8 homicides, his grandparents being a couple of, or actually I think it was his grandparents. And then I believe he killed his mother. And I think he cut somebody's head off and had it in a bowling bag, and et cetera, et cetera. He's bizarre, but he's a highly intelligent individual. And Leslie, you kind of had a brush with him back in the day when you were living in California, when he was out and about after he had killed his grandparents. Tell us a little bit about that. That's interesting to me.
Yeah. I had an encounter, I guess you would say, over a period of time with him. And Kemper has an interesting story because, like many serial killers, he had in his background animal abuse issues from an early age. The first that they know of was when he was 10. And then that was with a cat, dismembering and killing the animal, burying it alive. And then a neighbor's dog he shot, and then another cat when he was about 14. Then at 15 is when he ended up killing both of his grandparents. He was sent off to live with them, and he killed both of them, and then was sent away to Atascadero, the mental facility. So he's 15, went to the mental facility, got a sentence of 5 years. And so it's very interesting if you read books about him that go into detail about his background and the approach to dealing with people with mental health problems and what should they do with them, especially if they're a juvenile. So when Kemper got out of Atascadero, where they felt he was rehabilitated or healed for the most part, although there were some psychiatrists that doubted that, and they wrote to that effect. But that was 1969, and he moved to Santa Cruz, California, which is where I lived. And his technical address was 609 Ord Street, and we lived at 610 Ord Street. So he moved back with his mother, who, through looking at his history, one could argue that a lot of his problems came from issues with his mother. And the California Youth Authority, who was responsible for having him placed after he got out of Atascadero, said, place him anywhere but with his mother. So where did they place him? With his mother. So they lived, if you stood in our living room and looked across the narrow street that separated us from the house across the street, right behind that house, you could see a 2-story duplex. And they lived in that apartment. So it was kind of around the corner. If you do like a search on a MapQuest, it says it was a minute between our house and his house. So he was released in 69. And at that time I was in high school. And I don't know how much you want me to go into detail, but
well, a little bit about the prank calls, which I think is fascinating.
So in 69, it was between 69 and 72, because in 72, that was when Kemper first picked up the 2 co-eds that he ended up killing. But my encounter with him was between the time period of 69 and 72. And my belief is that he was, as he reported it, he was living a fantasy bag during that time. And I think he was ramping up from his time in Atascadero, where he spent a lot of time with the sexual predators there and was supposedly helping the psychiatrist to do testing on them, because he was such a bright kid that he got his fill of even more sexual perversion ideas through his time at Atascadero. So I think that when he got out in 69, he was just thinking about what he was going to do. And I think between the time of 69 and 72, he was just dabbling with things. So what happened to me personally was we lived across the street. The man was huge. If you're not familiar with who he is, you can look him up. He was 6'9" and was about 300 pounds, a big guy. I never remember seeing him. I did see his car, and the only reason I remember seeing his car is he was a CB kind of a fan of that, and he had a big antenna on the back of his car, and I remember seeing that car in the neighborhood. But one afternoon, it was on a Sunday, I remember it so clearly because it was odd. I was sitting in my parents' home because I was a teenager. I was in high school, and I was sitting there and the phone rang, like we had olden days. We had the hang-up phone with the cord and all that, and I went to answer the phone, and this person in a very calm, clear voice said, may I speak to Leslie? And I thought, okay, well, this is she. I didn't think any about it. And then he rattled off profanity to me. And I was so shocked by it that I said, what? Like, I was just so surprised by it. And he repeated it. And I just hung up. And I guess I was taken not so much by what he said, but by the type of voice he had. And he spoke with such clarity, and it wasn't like a little kid giving you a prank phone call. So all of that one phone call just was the beginning of a period of time where I felt terrorized in the house, because he would call us at random times. He would hang up. He would say things. He wouldn't say things. He would only say things to me. And eventually, we got the police involved. The sheriff's deputy came out and took a report. And at that time, the only thing they would do for like what they considered a prank phone call was to give him a fight. They said, if you want to meet with him, we can set that up. You know, you can agree to meet with him, and then we can trap him. And then
you better hope they're on their A game.
Yeah. And that's what they hadn't heard what I had heard, you know? So I thought, if that guy wasn't going to come after me before, he's going to come after me.
Right.
Then they said 6 months in jail and a $500 fine. So we just tried everything that was possible at that time to tap the line through the phone company. And one night when the phone rang and my mom picked it up, she said to him, you know, because we were all frazzled, he would call time after time, you know, like every few minutes in the wee hours of the morning. It was just is really disturbing. And we were all on edge and wondering, because our phone number was in the phone book, our address was in the phone book, and he knew my name. So he knew where we lived.
Yeah.
So
crazy. It's crazy to think that that's the way the norm was, you know, back in the day.
Yeah. So
as a kid, you know,
my mom was so upset by now. When she picked up the phone, she said, what do you want? What do you want with my daughter? And he said, I'm going to kill your daughter. I'm going to kill her, and then I'm going to rape her. And so that was, my mom was really upset by that. And so we tried a little bit more to be proactive with the sheriff's office. And I don't blame anybody for that. It's just, that's the way the times were as far as being able to find him. And at that time, even though I was in high school, I was going to Cabrillo College, which apparently he was going to Cabrillo College, and I was working in the bookstore. And I remember at that time just always looking over my shoulder, because somebody knew who I was, somebody knew where I lived, and I had no idea who they were. Yeah, it was terrifying. Very terrifying. And then we were getting the phone calls, and then the house next to us was getting phone calls, although no one was identifying themselves or asking for somebody in particular, and the house next to them too. So this went on for some time.
Yeah, I'll tell you something kind of spooky. So when I was a kid, and we were living in Los Angeles and up in the kind of the desert area, and I remember sitting on the living room floor, just sitting there watching TV, and my dad, you remember those old glass mirrors? It was like a wall of mirrors.
Yes. Yeah.
You know, with the gold lines
yes.
and all that stuff. They're really 60s looking. Mm-hmm. And so while we were sitting there, my dad is sitting right behind me, and he's watching TV, and he's looking, you know, we're looking that way. And right behind my dad's shoulder, my dad sees somebody looking in the window.
Oh.
Staring at him. You know what I mean? Right behind his head. And then my dad literally jumped up. And I've never seen it. He about knocked that door off the hinges running after these. And he never caught him. And that's what was really scary.
Yeah.
But yeah, I can kind of, and I can't relate to that point, my gosh. But so the other thing, you had kind of reached out briefly. You had reached out to were you interested in trying to write a book about Ed Kemper? Because I don't know, or what were you wanting to do? Because I know that you had kind of considered, he's still alive. He's 78 years old. He's still alive. He's in the, He's in the medical facility. I don't know if you'd showed that picture, Amanda, where he's staying now. It's basically some hospital that he's staying at right now with California Department of Corrections. But that's where he's at. Now, you had reached out to a detective at some point in time to try to talk to him. What did he tell you about that?
Oh, gosh. Well, what was interesting was when I worked as a 911 dispatcher, that was Santa Cruz County, and that was where Kemper did his killings. And so when I went to work there were detectives that had worked the Kemper case when I had been like younger and not been in the workforce. And so these years later, after I finished the book that I did write, I started to consider writing a book about Kemper because I really believe that he was doing some things during those years that are really not documented. There's a lot of material out there that talks about, the killings and him stalking women and picking up hitchhikers, but there's really not much about his years in between. So I got a hold of, because I was reading every book I could find about Kemper, it was a detective that I had actually worked with, Mickey Alufi in Santa Cruz. And it was really interesting because in this book, he had mentioned he had transcripts of his conversations with Kemper, and he was one of the detectives that went back to Colorado, I think it was, where Kemper turned himself in. And they were in the car with him for 3 days, driving back from Santa Cruz or to Santa Cruz. And so it was, all the information was in this book about his conversations, his official conversations and interviews with Kemper. And one of the things he said, which was very chilling to me, was he said that Kemper had mentioned how he had plans for everybody in the neighborhood. But then he didn't go on to say much more about that. So I wanted to get a hold of him and I wanted to tell him my story, and I wanted to find out if he would be a little more forthcoming about that part of his conversations. And it was funny because we had a real nice conversation. Then I asked him about that and he said, I don't remember ever saying that. And I said, well, it's on page, whatever page it was in this book. And so he went back and spent some time looking at the original transcriptions. And I guess he couldn't find some of it. He was helpful, but he.
Well, I'll tell you this much. Leslie. I'm reading some of the comments here, and everybody's like, it wouldn't be necessarily bad if he just kind of went to sleep and saved everybody some money. But I'm going to tell you, Ed Kemper, if you didn't know, if you've ever watched Mindhunter, and that's basically the story of how the profiling unit for the FBI came about, when John Douglas would go out and start interviewing these people, and Ed Kemper was like number one. He was the first one that they literally sat down with. And so he's kind of like one of the original people that they interviewed that started the FBI profiling unit. And so even though he's a sicko, he was incredibly intelligent and somebody that they gleaned a lot of information from in sitting down and actually visiting. I would say they probably visited with him over years, I'm guessing, because of course that was their first. They just started developing that unit, and I'm sure that they really, and he probably helped him out a ton to know kind of what. I don't even know that he really knows what his main issues are, etc. But I gotta tell you. So the other thing I want to mention real quick is that the real reason that we brought her on here is because of this book. And Leslie did something that a lot of people want to do, and that's actually at Barnes and Noble up there where you were living. I don't know if it's in Barnes and Noble is it throughout the country, or was it
No, it's available in their catalog, but they carry it locally here just because it's a local story.
Okay. And first of all, just this is a book that literally took you 5 years of working on. Is that right? Isn't that right?
That's about right. And that's because I spent time interviewing the mother. It was a lot of research because it was really important to me to be accurate about what I was saying, since I was calling it true crime. So yeah, it was just a lot of conversations with the mother and going through the material. Took me longer than I thought.
And this is a family that you actually got to meet originally up there where you were living a little bit before the murders. So tell us kind of how this book came about. And let me ask you this real quick before you dive in deep into that. How hard was this? I mean, to sit down, what is advice for you to give to somebody about sitting down and taking something on like this? Was it tough? Did it just start all of a sudden? You had an idea in your mind? And by the way, this is the book. If you want to get this, it's on Amazon. She was kind enough. She sent me a signed copy, so I'm very, very lucky. This is on the stack of the 6 books that I'm reading at the moment. But so far I've read about a third of it. I've got my little thing in there, and it's been good so far for sure. What's your advice to somebody about sitting down and writing a book? How tough was it?
It was a lot harder than I thought, and I would have thought that writing a true crime book wouldn't be that hard because you don't have to come up with characters, you don't have to figure out your plot. It's all pretty much there for you. All you have to do is what I thought is just collect the information, put it in order, write some transitions to make the storyline readable for somebody, and there you go. I mean, I wouldn't have thought 5 years, but I would have thought maybe a couple. And I just marvel when I hear people that are creating novels that they're dreaming up the characters. That's just not me. I wouldn't even want to write a fantasy or a nonfiction because fiction because nonfiction is what really interests me. But
me too.
I think. For me personally, because I knew this mother, because the mother had a real desire to have the story told for a lot of reasons, I was doing it as a favor to her. So that was my motivation to not give up on it, even though it was taking me a lot longer than I had thought, because I had a reason to tell it. And so that allowed me to, I think you have to have a reason to tell a story or write a book. Otherwise, it's too hard to do it. Although there are other people out there that write different kinds of books that seem to be able to do it quickly. I just couldn't.
She actually wanted her story told, and it was something that kind of interested you from the start. And basically, this is the adopted son who had killed the adopted dad, actually, the dad that had adopted him. And it sounded to me like they were a relatively affluent, or they were pretty well off, at least not initially, but they had made something of their lives, and then they reached out to adopt this young man, and he grew up and he had some issues as a young kid, and then they continued to manifest as he got older, and then intensified via the introduction to marijuana. Everybody thinks weed. Oh yeah, no problem. Mm-hmm. Hey, let me remind everybody that's listening here. Marijuana is the most deadly drug of them all. Take all the other drugs and combine them. Well, actually, fentanyl is horrible, and there are a lot of people die from fentanyl use. But let me tell you, if you were to take individual drugs and murders occurring, marijuana, you can take all the other drugs and combine them, and it's not as much as marijuana. It's a very volatile drug, so it's not quite all the everybody's feeling good and eating Taco Bell. It's a little bit more than that. So you get involved in this story. And then you start researching, and then the mother ends up giving you hundreds and hundreds of letters. Is that right?
Yeah. That was really interesting because I was doing just background on the family, and she was explaining to me, his childhood and things that occurred as he was growing up. And then she kept wanting to give me these letters that he had written to her from prison because she had saved every one. There were 350 of them, and they smelled bad. They smelled like they'd been in some musty place. And I wasn't real excited about getting these letters, and I kept kind of putting her off about them. And I said, I'll do it. I'll look at them. Let's finish this part. But she was so persistent that I had a weekend where I wasn't too busy. And so I brought all the letters home, and I spread them out all over the kitchen table and the counters and put them all in chronological order and decided to start in on them. And it was interesting because it was all about his interaction with her after it happened. So you figured that this 16-year-old son that they had invested their life in, and he shoots and kills her husband while she's away at a high school reunion. And she comes home, and her husband, who she loved so much, is gone, and her son's responsible. And she's so devastated and shocked. And then now what does she do about her son? And you didn't mention, but they ended up having a daughter, and the 10-year-old daughter at the time of the murder was the one that found the father dead in the house. So, I mean, it's tragedy all around. It's very sad. And so the mother, who was a friend of mine, she was left with, how do I put my life back together? And so a lot of the story is about how she dealt with the aftermath of the murder and her relationship with him, and his conversation and communication with her through letters after the conviction, because at 16 he was sent to state prison. And so,
strangely enough, he wanted to go. He actually requested to go to adult prison, which I've never heard of that before. And the mother said, "What was her take on? Did she keep? I mean, she maintained a relationship with him over the years."
Yes, but as you get more into the book, you'll see there were periods where there was no relationship. There was 10 years and there was no conversation.
Okay.
So he was so mean to her and so blaming her, and it was just too hurtful for her to even hear from him, that she had to cut off all ties. But yeah, it was the strangest thing. And she, even when we talked about the book, that was one of the things that she said. He kept saying, I want to go to adult prison. And she said, you have no idea what you're talking about. And he said, I don't want to be in with a bunch of juvenile delinquents.
You know, what's funny is it's not funny, but I'll tell you what, to tell you the truth, it's probably less dangerous in the adult prison than it is in the juvenile facilities. I mean, I don't know. I know that I've had several juveniles that have went off to prison. They were like 14, 15 years old, and I wouldn't want to be in the pod with them. I can tell you that. Adults seem to be a little bit more tame. And I knew somebody that spent a tremendous amount of time in prison, and he said, and I asked him, I said, how is it in there? And he goes, yeah, man, I hang out with the killers. They're a heck of a lot less, they're a lot more easygoing, and usually they're a one and done. You know, they killed somebody because of emotions and it's over with. They're not your constant threat, and they're not gangsters trying to prove themselves constantly. They're pretty tame and laid back. Not the Ed Kempers, ladies and gentlemen. I'm talking about and somebody had asked, why are all these people so smart? You know, well, I don't know that they're so smart, but Ed Kemper is smart, and Ted Bundy was too. Why are those people? Because they're probably got some social awkwardness. And they're sociopaths. I mean, they're just flat out sociopaths. And as a matter of fact, in this particular case, this young man was as well. Is that correct? He was diagnosed as a sociopath. Yes. What is a sociopath, just for the listener?
Well, from my understanding, I read a whole book about it, but basically they aren't able, or they don't feel, if you don't want to say they can't, but they don't feel empathy. So that when you don't feel empathy for others, it affects your behavior toward others and how you see them. So in this book by Bob Hare, have you read the one by Bob Hare? No. It's called Without Conscience. It's very interesting. It's kind of short. He's the one that did all the tests, set up all the testing for sociopath that they use nowadays. But he said a lot of people, like white collar workers, the people that like the what was his name, Bernie Madoff, the people that ripped people off through investments, they don't think a thing of it. You know, they just They just do it because it's a way to make money or whatever. And there's just no sense of how's that going to affect somebody else. So it's a lot more complicated than that. But that's kind of the primary point that I remember from what a sociopath is. And then it just becomes very hard to retrain them because they don't think like that. So what he also addressed in the book about children, like if that was diagnosed to parents when they were younger, what could they really affect any change? Or once a sociopath, is that just the way they are? And so there's some thought that at least if you knew, you could maybe approach things differently with the hope of having a different outcome. You wouldn't address it such as, oh, well, how would you feel if somebody treated you this way? There's other ways that you could approach them if you knew, and maybe, show them how what they do will ultimately affect them badly or something. But it was interesting because I thought, what's a parent to do? So they figure out their kid's a sociopath, then what?
Yeah, no, you're right. Just to remind everybody who we're here with, this is Leslie Ghiglieri, author of this book here, The Decision to Kill, and a true crime story of a teenage killer and the mother who loved him. I worked a murder a long time ago that this kid ended up killing his dad because he had some mental issues going on, and he ended up murdering his dad, and then he turned around and turned the gun on his mother and shot her like 5 or 6 times. And how she ended up surviving, it's just by the grace of God. But the mother, I remember, she showed up to the trial and she was there to support him. And I thought, man, I just don't know that I could do that. I just don't know. That's I don't ever want to go through it. I can tell you that. And going through it the way I did, that's bad enough. But and by the way, somebody mentioned something about Taco Bell and they're not sponsored. You're absolutely correct. So strike that from the record. Forget I mentioned that. But no, listen, so this became a part of your life. I mean, literally, I'm sure you want to spend 16-hour days on this, but this became a part of your life. And has this somewhat, well, what happened to him? Is he still around? And what happened to the mom, et cetera?
Oh gosh, you want to hear the whole story? Leave something. Well, he had a genetic disease that they didn't know about because, like I said, he was adopted. So there were things in his background that the family didn't realize besides the fact of the mental health, which affected him in prison. So through the letters, that's very interesting to see how all of that played in his deteriorating health and his real, he was brought up in a Christian family, but he never bought into it himself. He never had a faith of his own. He was just, looking out for Dwayne, looking out for himself. But as he got into prison, I know you hear about jailhouse conversions and wonder how many of those are real. What I found in reading the letters, and I read every one of them 3 times, I felt like he was really searching. As time went on, as he got a little older, as he stopped being so angry and so blaming other people. So I think with his relationship with his mother stood by him, but not in support of him. She stood by him because she was his mother, and that's what she felt she should do. But I wouldn't say at that time their relationship evolved over years. So the letters take you through years, and there's information about what's going on her life at the same time. So the story continues between the two of them. But he ended up dying. He did not die in prison, and his hope was that he would not die in prison. He died in the hospital. When she and I embarked on her book, we knew she was dealing with health issues, which turned into cancer. And ultimately, she also died.
And she was considered, I mean, she was older, right?
Yes. Yeah, she was. And the book talks about that and her relationship with him after he passed away, as far as how she viewed it. And I guess that's the point of the book, is she felt like drug addiction, abuse, substance abuse, mental health issues are still ongoing. This murder happened in 1986. It's really not any different. If anything, it's worse. And she just felt for the parents and the family members that are dealing with these kinds of issues that are so difficult. And so that's why she felt like, in a lot of ways, she traversed it successfully, and she wanted to offer parents hope. And she was a Christian, so her view about her son was, and the message in her book was, never stop praying for your kids. Never, never, never stop. But she went through a lot of years where, nothing good was happening as far as her relationship with him.
Yeah. Yeah. And has this book, are you going to write another one?
I really want to. I thought maybe I'd write a book about Kemper and about those years and what I think was going on with him. I tried writing him in prison. I didn't get anything back. I only sent one letter. I was a little freaked out about the whole idea of it. I guess I haven't felt really motivated to write something in particular. Yeah. I really enjoyed the process. I did. It was grueling and I got discouraged, but I was very happy with the outcome. I felt like it was
I think you should
a
be
good
very
message.
Proud of it. I think you should be very proud of this book, because obviously you've put a tremendous amount of work into this. This isn't one of those that's just really cheaply done. It's very well written, and you're an exceptionally good writer. That's kind of your hobby. You like to write, so
I do.
I think you. Yeah. See, I write all the time. I've written probably a library full of reports. And I hate writing. That's the problem. That's the big problem. But listen, I'm telling you, this is a good book. I don't have people on here. Hey, by the way, thanks for coming on. Your book sucks, but I really wanted to. No, this is a good book. It's something worthy of looking at, and I appreciate the fact that you took the time to do this and shared this story, because there's a lot of people that probably have similar stories, or they know people that are similar circumstances. In addition to that, there's a website that actually is thedecisiontokill.com. And there's a lot of photographs that are in that website, along with additional content to tell you a little bit more about the story, which I think is really, really good. And that's awesome. And it's your anniversary today, isn't it?
It is.
Happy anniversary.
Thank you.
And tell your husband, thank you for allowing you to come on the show. And I appreciate that, because when you told me it was your anniversary, there was I didn't want to obligate you to join us, but it is very much appreciated.
Oh, we'll celebrate tomorrow. Thank you.
Great. And so, I don't know anything. Like I said, this is a really interesting journey. When you talk about this story, the case that I would really love to do something with, and that is Cody Posey. And he's an individual that ended up killing his parents and sister in New Mexico. And it's a case that I watched on Court TV many, many years ago. And it is absolutely interesting to a whole nother level. It's a fascinating case. So, but like I said, I applaud you for taking the time to write this. And is this something that still is kind of part of your life still to this day, where it's just part of your identity?
Yeah, it probably is, because every once in a while I'll do a book signing somewhere, or people ask about it. I never got very good at doing social media, TikTok videos and all that's required nowadays to be really out there. But the book's done fairly well. I did want to mention that a portion of each book sale goes to addiction recovery, a particular program that's here locally. And I felt like that was really important, because that's something that the mother was searching for and couldn't find. And so we felt like that was important to give back to that. If maybe it would help someone else.
Well, I have no doubt that it's actually helpful. Somebody that's kind of was saying something about Calgary Flames. That's the shirt I'm wearing, and they were encouraging that I like the Toronto Maple Leafs. Well, I actually know a Toronto Maple Leaf that was on that team for a long, long time, and he follows me on Twitter, and I follow him back, and that's Jeff O'Neill. So if you like the Toronto Maple Leafs, I actually know one of the former pros, and he's actually listened. I think he's listened to a couple of these. I don't know. I know that he watches this, etc. But hey, ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate you all coming on here. And Leslie, what final thoughts would you like to leave this audience? And feel free to
well, that's
to the world.
To the world. Gosh, that's a big order. I think it's interesting that so many people have an interest in true crime. And I think that's because we're all, I don't know, it's more the human side of it. Why do people do what they do? And just the intrigue of human relationships. And I appreciate what you do, Jason, just out in the field and here and giving people a chance to talk about these different cases. And I think, unfortunately, there's never going to be a shortage of crime stories to talk about. But some of those old cases are very interesting to look back at, the OJs and the Zodiacs and all of that. So thank you for providing a venue like this. I really appreciate being included.
No, I appreciate it. A lot of people that are listening in, I know a lot of people are like, how come it's not going right now? How can I get on it? You guys did a really good job tonight by figuring out how to get on, but I did a good job telling you where to go. I appreciate each and every one of you being here. Next week, this was episode number 39. Next week, episode number 40, it's going to be Michael Cantrell, and he's a really interesting guy. This guy's written several books. He's basically the prison officer, or he's Mike at theprisonofficer.com. And Mike is he's written a number of books. This guy he's going to be interesting too. I think he's going to be fascinating. I'll tell you at the end of the month, I just a little sneak peek at what's coming at the very end of the month, February the 28th, probably one of the most probably one of the biggest authorities when it comes to the Helter Skelter, Charles Manson, the Manson murders. And he's going to be fascinating. He was a consultant for the movie Once Upon a Time in Hollywood by Quentin Tarantino. He actually hung out with Quentin Tarantino for a while, and he helped him with the movie. And so he's going to be coming on February the 28th. I'm not going to give any more than that because that's plenty. That's plenty. I just a little teaser. That's what I'm doing. And but like I said, actually tonight I'm actually going to be a good person and I'm going to get off on time. Ladies and gentlemen, I want you to check out my YouTube page, Detective Jason White. All of those 3 PNR episodes that I spoke of with her, I attached them on there. So you can. I'm not getting the views. It's going to Adam, but you can certainly go on there and you can check out any of those episodes. You can check out any other podcast I've been on. And you can check out just a motherload of great content. And if you end up there, or you end up going to the YouTube page for KGRA, make sure you hit like and subscribe to their channel, please. They appreciate that, and it shows people that it just helps. All right. Thanks again, Leslie. We need to stay in touch more often. Keep me posted as to what's going on, and maybe down the line we'll have another true crime true crime panel, and we'll tackle another case. That would be great.
I would like that. I'm going to check out this Cody Posey.
Cody Posey. I expect you to message me and tell me what you think of it. He killed his whole family. I don't have time to get into it, but let me tell you something. Fascinating case, and it's a case that I would love to have something done with, and I'd love to get Cody on here, but he's disappeared. He doesn't do interviews. So, but ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for being here. Without you, this is not a show. Leslie, hang out. Don't click off. We'll talk after the show. And thanks again, everybody. I appreciate you. We'll see you next week for episode number 40. Michael Cantrell. Take us out, Amanda.